Hannah, thank you so much for joining me today on Suburban Burnout. Is it me or do the suburbs bring a lot of divorce right now? I don't know. It's
Yeah, I mean, obviously, divorce is front and center in my life and in my mind because I'll sometimes wonder that, like, is divorce a part of the conversation for like non-divorce, non-law firm people? And so I've heard people say that lately. I'm probably not the best one to ask because everywhere I look, my content's about divorce, my art's about divorce, my life I deal with divorce, my work I deal with divorce. So yes.
absolutely. I get that. I mean, that's how I am with grief. So yes, I get that too. But okay, so let's give everyone a little glimpse into your origin story. So, becoming a divorce lawyer, what led you to Hembree Bell Law Firm? And then add in some personal things as whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah. So, I mean, my origin story that makes me sound like I'm going to be like a super villain, which I'm sure in some people's story I am, right? We can't control how we show up in other people's story, how they see us. But so, I say that people who are divorce lawyers who are divorced, like, we got here because we went through this process and decided to turn back and run back into the burning building, or I say like the deep, dark, dense woods, and help people carve their way through. A lot of lawyers who go through divorce run for the hills and like, you could not pay me enough money to be a divorce lawyer. For me, I went to law school when I was turning 30 is when I started, and I had already been a recruiter. So I recruited nurse practitioners and physician assistants across for clinics and hospitals across Texas. And I wanted to like my job. Actually, the way my now ex-husband did, he loved his job. He was good at his job. And I thought, I want to feel that way. I want to love something like that. And so started being open to that and bounced around and doing kind of different things. And then through my MBA coursework, took a business in law, like a business law course, and realized, hey, I really like this. And I think I might have a knack for it. So went back to law school and ended up doing pretty good in school. And so I graduated into a big law job, which in lawyer world, that's sort of like the big leagues, right? Like you
Right.
graduate at the top of your class and you get this kind of fancy job and you make six figures right away and all that. So I had sort of made it. But along the way in law school, I actually got divorced. So people talk to me about going to law school. I'm like, plot ruiner. I definitely got divorced in the middle of
Oh,
it.
no.
So it's through that. And when I got divorced, my kids did not live with me at first. I was the quote unquote dad, like what people think of the dad. I paid child support. My kids did not live with me. It was a rough time. And then what happened was I graduated. I did go on to the big law job, but about a year or so after the divorce, I went back and filed a custody modification. I was trying to just change a couple small logistical things and get some help from the court because we couldn't agree. And then it blew up into this whole thing. And then ended up I was in a jury trial. So Texas has jury trials on custody issues, which is so bananas bonkers to most states. Like most states do not do this. But literally, a jury decides who should be the primary parent, who should have the right to determine the primary residence of the children, which is like for short primary.
Wow, I didn't know
And
that. I don't
yes, so
okay.
that's a wild, weird, wonky thing. So 12 strangers are going to decide what happens. And I think that there's pluses and minuses of that. But anyway, I found myself in a 7-day jury trial, which is like a full week and then a couple days on the modification. We were successful. My kids were, and I say we because at the time I was dating, who's now my husband, Drew. Like this was after the divorce and everything. I was successful, and my kids relocated with me where I lived in San Antonio at that point because we'd been living in Southwest Texas. And anyway, they moved with me to San Antonio, and it was a really rough reentry. It was not smooth. It was not easy. And that's how I got into this. So about 6 months after my case was over, because like right after the case was finished for them, it's never really over in family law in Texas if you have minor children. I thought I've got to go help. At the time, I thought, other women. That expanded to think other people. Um, because I was a lawyer and it was really hard for me to find a lawyer. Like, I've got to go back and help other women who are going through this. Now, I'm like, okay, because I come from a long line of rash, decisive people. Okay. The Hembrees, we are quick decision makers and we are go people, which is like really good and also can be a challenge. So I knew better by then. I'd tamed that part of myself at least a little bit. And like, let me sit this out. Let me wait a minute. And so about 6 months later, I was still feeling the same way. And like, okay. And I went, it was Labor Day weekend. I was on a plane. There was no Wi-Fi and I didn't have anything else to do. I remember I didn't bring a book or nothing. I was going to visit Drew, my then maybe by then he was probably my fiance by then, and I hatched the plan on a notebook with a pen and paper of starting what's now Hembree Bell Law Firm. And I just kind of figured it out and did the basic math of like, okay, I think I can do this. And actually, my math was how much money do I need to pay my bills? And I was net, like taking home $5,000 a month net from my job at the big law firm, after all the things. So I was like, okay, I feel like if I had $10,000, I could do this. I did not, Megan, plan. I did not have a business plan. I did not have a marketing strategy, marketing budget. Then I just like said, oh, I think I'm going to start a law firm. And got a loan from my then boyfriend, now husband, Drew, for $10,000 that I paid back like within 90 days as the money to start it. And then
Wow.
little bit by little bit, here I am. And now we've got this firm. We serve Central Texas, sort of up and down I-35, San Antonio, up to Austin, up to Belton, Rico, and then around this Central Texas, we've got a team of about 45 people. So it's been busy. It's been awesome. It's the best ever to take, and you know this, to take your sorrow and turn it into your life's work. And that's what I've done. That's what I wake up every day doing. Yeah.
I feel like I really see that in all of the information you post online and what makes it different. And if you do not follow her, I will give you all the information after this, but I wanted you to really touch on just not just like the logistics, which love that as well because you do that great, but then also the emotional and physical part of going through with a divorce, right?
Mhm.
Just to start us off on this conversation, there's something that you said, healing him won't save the relationship. What does that mean? When you said that online, I was like, I've had clients that have said, well, if we could go to therapy or we could do this. And really, it's like there's a breaking point and there's also you're two individual people. What does that mean when it comes to divorce and that step to take towards divorce?
I think as women, and especially, I imagine most of the people listening to this are mothers. And so as mothers, we're used to and conditioned to, and it's very effective to get in control of the situation, right? Everybody knows what happens if you're not in control of the situation and it's Saturday morning soccer time. Okay. And you did not plan, you have no strategy, you don't know where any of the soccer jerseys are. You forgot that it's snack day, right? You know what it feels like not to be in control of a situation. How does that turn out? So we learn from the time we're organizing feeding times and changing diapers in what order and counting, outputs from babies who need to gain weight, that getting in control of the situation, if only we could get on top of it, then we'll be safe. Then everything will finally be okay. And I think a lot of the rest of our life is spent, if you're willing and if you're ready, if you're able to realize that, we're unlearning that fact. And so I think we apply this skill, this
Mhm.
survival skill, to management of our husbands. And I'm going to say husbands, for anybody listening, I'm an equal opportunity spouse person. So spouse, they, them, he, she, whatever. Okay. I mean all of that, but I just use husbands for short. So, I think a lot of women attempt to do this with the husband. And so it's like a couple things, like try to control him. I guess back up. They know something's wrong. And if only he would, then it lets us off the hook because we project. If you've spot it, you've got it. People in our lives, you eventually learn, if you're on this personal growth journey, that the people in our lives are just a mirror. So a lot of the problems, I'm not saying every problem, but a lot of the problems you see in this other person are actually inside of you. And so what I think a lot of women do, they know something's wrong. They know to get control over the situation can fix it. So they try to get control over the other person and their improvement and their growth and their healing. And I'm using quotes, right? Like them getting better so that ultimately it's selfish and self-serving. I want them to get better, not because I love them, not because I want this entire life's journey to be best and most beautiful for them. I mean, yeah, maybe sure, but you're doing it in this situation usually because you want them to be better so that you feel better. Okay. And what you learn is, I mean, hello, they've been saying this phrase since the beginning of ever. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Nobody ever changed. He didn't want to change. Period. The end of story. Won't happen. People will not change unless they decide that they want to change. You can get some compliance. You can force them into therapy for a while, and then they're going to resent you. And then they're going to make you the problem. Okay. And they're going to flip that whole thing around. And so, look, there are a lot. I'm not trying to say that the projection thing, don't take that too far. Like, there are some dudes who are just assholes. Can we cuss on here? Do we still
Oh, of
cuss words?
course, yes.
Okay. So if I ain't cussing, I'm not telling you my heart. So there are a lot of men out there who are just messed up assholes. Okay. So I'm not trying to say that there aren't dudes with issues, but probably you knew that when you married him. Probably your body told you. Probably you ignored the signs. I know. I mean, I'm raising my hand. Ask me how I know. And you knew that in your heart when you did it. And that's okay. Look, once we know better, we do better. But I think what happens is we knew it when we married them. You know, you get married in your 20s probably. Then you're in your 30s and you're kind of like waking up into your womanness and you're kind of looking around.
Yeah.
Maybe you've already got some kids around and you're like, wait a minute. What has happened to my life? Why is he such a jerk? Since when do I put up with someone being such a punk to me? And like all these things, it's like you start to wake up right as he's getting real comfortable. And
Ah,
so there's a disconnect there, right? And there's that saying that men marry women or women marry men hoping that they'll change. Men marry women hoping that they won't. And the thing is, we're
yes.
both wrong. You know, men ain't going to change. And that woman, she's going to evolve the whole way through. And I say men ain't going to change. They can change if they want to. It is not my experience or observation that men do that without the like sort of encouragement and help of women. And that kind of goes in the face of what I was saying a second ago about their healing, right? But the difference is the man has to want it for himself. And then I think in healthy relationships, the woman can be the muse and the thing that draws him out to his own decision to change. But in divorce, the thing is, things have gotten so bad that you don't have time to be that. He isn't wanting to change. And you're just thinking, if he'll only do these things, then we always put our joy on layaway. We always put our happiness for later. And it's like, okay, if only he'll do these things, then. And so that's why I think healing him won't save your marriage because it's the way I conceptualize marriage and the way that my husband, I'm remarried. So my husband now, Drew, and I do is like two complete circles, two human beings that come into Venn diagram in marriage, but we still are everything that we aren't together, right? We're not overlapping circles. We do not complete each other Jerry Maguire style. We are two individuals who continue to grow as long as they're still Venn diagram, right?
Well, no, that's really perfectly said. I mean, all the sayings that are traditional to say, they're there for a reason, but then I think there has to be someone who has also walked in their shoes to tell them these things, and that's why I think just the way
Nobody
that you
told me,
describe
Megan.
it. Yeah,
Nobody told me. I didn't know any of this. When I was getting divorced in 2014 and thinking of leaving 2013 going into 2014. Nobody was talking about this. I don't even know how much anybody said anything on Facebook. I mean, there were barely videos on the internet. So that's the difference where we are now. We live in the greatest time, the greatest moment in the history of ever to be alive. And I know there's a lot of bad stuff going on, but there's also a lot of good stuff. Don't let them trick you to think there isn't good stuff too, because like this podcast, what if somebody would have told me this back then? I had to learn it through blood, sweat, and tears. Nobody
yes,
told me. Nobody was honest with me. And I don't know. Look, I don't know how much I would have had the ears to hear it back then. I think something in me
sure.
would have recognized the truth and I would have been mad at it. I would have been mad at the truth. Like, you don't understand. You don't know him. I would have said all that. Because look, it sucks to recognize your own issues. And there's that quote that says the degree to which a person can grow is directly proportional to the amount of truth they can accept about themselves without running away. And back then, I think my capacity of growth would have been relatively small because I don't know how much I could have accepted the truth that I had. I don't know. I don't know what it would have been. So for anybody listening who is feeling mad at me or triggered or annoyed or whatever, I understand that. I would also welcome you or invite you to consider something somewhere in your body doesn't know that what I'm saying is true. Just like how you knew when you married him that he had an alcohol problem, but you thought he'd stop drinking. You thought
Mhm.
he'd grow up. He didn't, did he? And you knew it. So there's something I think in us as women, our intuition knows. And so I don't know. Anyway, I just think that there are so many resources for women in this spot now Like,
Mhm.
we created the My Confident Life Women's Circle. And in that circle, we're getting together women and helping guide them through divorce and beyond. And it's on the Mighty Networks, one of those online things where women can get together and talk and connect and support each other and point each other to resources. There wasn't nothing like that back then. And so that's you're in a good spot if you're considering divorce right now, because there is prolific information about the legal, the logistics, the emotional. You can't swing a stick on the internet without seeing some sort of divorce coach sort of person. There's a lot
Yeah.
out there now.
Well, so you do have so many resources. You have the divorce prep course, the Should I Get Divorced quiz, which I want you to maybe, like, give our listeners a taste of that, if you will, but
Yeah.
I think prep course to me, at least gives someone who don't have their ducks in a row, or they're trying to figure out what this really looks like. Anything like that, I feel like gives you at least one step to take.
Well, remember, we talked about control. It
Yeah.
gives you a little bit of this sense that you can begin to control the chaos. And that's a balancing act, getting enough control, but while also going with it. Right? I mean, it is just that, isn't that the life's balancing act? But okay, so the quiz, let me say about that. There's a quiz, we can put it in the show notes, or it's definitely on my website,
Yeah.
where I think that's one of the hardest moments. Like, is it time to go or not? And I think a lot of women spend years in this spot. And I do not recommend that you rush it, because for me, a central belief of me is you have to know that you've done everything you could to make peace with your divorce. What I don't want for you is that you left some stones unturned and then you find yourself 5 years later going, man, what would have happened if? You get a lot of clarity later, ladies, when some dust has settled and things have moved on. So, like, the quiz is for someone trying to consider, okay, do I stay or do I go? And, like, in a nutshell, the way I explain this to people is when the cost of staying exceed the cost of leaving, you'll know it's time to go. And in the guide prep course we're talking about, My Confident Divorce, we even go through a T chart. Like, there's a part of one of the modules that's like, okay, how to know. So you on one side, look, if you're listening or if you're just, at work or whatever, draw you a T chart, that thing, it's just like a T we used to do in school. And on one side is cost of staying, and on one side of cost is of leaving. Obviously, cost of leaving is there'll be fallout with the kids. I won't have as much money. Brr, 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 brr. Okay. They're mostly practical plus the kid issue. If you're honest, you're probably going to say, and am I going to end up alone? And then on the other side of staying is walking on eggshells. The kids see us fighting all the time. I feel stuck in my own life, right? Now, it's not one to one. It's not like you add up and then you decide. It's kind of like when you decide to take a new job or not, just getting clear on how to think about it. That's what the quiz kind of helps you do, is gives you some things to think about. And actually, that's what I'm going to spend the whole, like, first half of my book, that's coming out in the spring, talking
Nice. We
about
love a good
that,
book.
about the
Okay.
discernment. Is it time to go? Or do I stay? It's going to be called Carry Your Own Groceries. What I wish I knew before I filed for divorce. And we're going to talk through in the book really in detail how to know when to stay and when to go. And then, okay, so once you've done the quiz, once you've made that decision, I guess I've done everything I can. I guess it's time to go. The next thing you need to do is start to get a plan. But the problem is, Megan, most women wait too late. They wait until they are, and I know this because it's what I did. They are emotionally exhausted and depleted. They've got nothing left. They are a shell of a person. Maybe they're not eating. Maybe they're eating too much. Maybe they don't want to leave the house. Maybe they're hiding under the covers. Maybe they got them a new special someone. Maybe they're drinking too much wine. They're using other kinds of drugs and stuff. Maybe they're avoiding their whole life, right? They're doing things to get their needs met in their current situation, which may not be the best self care. And then they're at the
Mm.
end of their rope. They've tried everything. And then they're crawling out of their marriage like, from the trenches in the middle of World War II or whatever. I'm just like envisioning all those movies where they're like in the mud and then
Yeah.
getting out from there. You don't have all the energy you need. So once you've made that decision, that's the first thing you're going to do. The next thing you're going to do is tie a knot at the end of your rope and hang on, and don't panic and file and start, because you're going to want to act. Like, once you've made this decision, it is done for you. You're going to want to take decisive, swift action to do something once you've made up your mind. You do that at your peril if you're not prepared, because that's what I did. I mean, I only ever know how to tell anybody anything pretty much because I lived it myself.
Yeah.
So the things I'm telling y'all, I've lived through. That's what I did. I was not prepared to get divorced when it came out. And what happened for me is I call it my give a damn got busted. My give a damn got busted. And I stopped jumping when he said how high, right? Or when he'd say jump, I'd say how high. I stopped reacting to temper and anger. Like, you seem mad. That seems like a you problem, not a me problem. All right. Which is the healthy way to think. But back then it seemed like it was a me problem. And that change in behavior tipped him off. And that's what women do because we're generally speaking so consistent. We do the
Okay.
same thing every day. We act the same way all the time, and changes in behavior to a cunning, observant spouse. They're like, what's going on here? And anyway, he sniffed it out before I was ready. And I blurted it out because I didn't have my game plan.
Oh
And
my goodness,
it,
I've heard this story. Like, I have heard this personally from people, and I'm so glad you're saying this because I know that feeling, and I know what that looks like from a person who's just fed up. And there are people who've really gotten into a situation where they aren't able to get what they want or what they deserve or what they envision because it just was so abrupt and they were done with with a capital D. So, yes.
yeah, DUN done, I
Go.
say, because they're DUN done. So what happens is they'll take a shit deal with shit terms. Often they found them some other fella who's whispering sweet nothings into their ear. And they just think that remember, we're putting our joy out there. So if only I was with him then. And they're just, buying another loop around the track. I envision life like we're going around a track to learn lessons. And I think, remember in junior high or whatever, when you have to like run the mile and you go, one,
Yes.
two. If I'm not a runner, I think you're maybe an athlete, Megan. I have a feeling, but I was not a runner person. It's like around the track one time was a long time for me. Still would be. And getting around the track, the thing is that gal jumping straight into something else with some other fella. She's going to come back around the track to learn her lesson that she picked wrong. She picked from deficit. She picked from pick me energy. She picked from abdicating her personal responsibility for her own life. She picked from this idea that something out there would fix what's in here. And she hasn't learned that peace is an inside job. And she hasn't learned to sit with the hard stuff. And so what happens is these women get to the end of their rope. They'll do anything they can to meet their needs met, get their needs met. Often there's some fella who's willing to say he'll be the one to do that and rescue her. She takes a shit deal to get into that situation. That situation falls apart. And then she's left with the shrapnel that was once her life. And so my confident divorce prep guide and course is to stop that inertia and to catch women. That's why we're inviting them into the circle first so they can start to get surrounded by other women making that decision. And then, okay, hang on. Before you just go willy-nilly doing stuff, go through the course with me. It's like 6 hours worth of stuff I used to charge money for it, but it's free now. I didn't want money to stand in the way of women getting prepared. This is just my life's work because I genuinely believe that had I done the things I'm telling everybody to do, I wouldn't be talking to you on this podcast. Absolutely not. I know when I can win and I know when I'm beat in life. That's a skill of mine. It hasn't happened that often, but sometimes it does happen. And the way the circumstances, I was at the end of my rope. I was in law school. I was on moot court team. If you would have looked at my life through a microscope, and I wasn't doing great. Like I just wasn't even eating. I wasn't trying not to eat. I just could not keep food down. I was living on one Jamba Juice a day. And then we hop into the other circumstances. So it's trying to stop her and say, don't do it. It could cost you your kids, could cost you a ton of money. It could cost you your future. Now, look, if you're listening to this and it's too late, you already wall off and popped off and filed and whatever. It's not like all hope is lost. I did it all wrong. And now I have a multi-7-figure business and a house on a hill and a great husband. I just believe all things work for good ultimately at the end of the day. But there is a more straight line to good, or at least not total shit, than the one that I took.
Well, you are a seeker. I think one of the key components here is you decided there was some growth that could be from this. There was a lot of lessons learned, all of those things. And I think it's hard to do when maybe your spouse is a narcissist. Maybe your spouse is an alcoholic. Maybe your spouse is just, tying you into circumstances that you don't feel like you can get out of. And I think that all of that is a lot of weight to consider. So,
Mm.
yeah, I think most people probably come to the table just beat down. There's a lot of things that have happened that you probably can't even put into words, you know? I know that some
Mm.
people have literally started writing down, maybe it was their therapist that said it, or, start writing down the things that have happened to them, because then they'll get gaslit, and and it didn't happen, and so then they don't go to divorce because maybe they're thinking it's their fault. And look, there, I think that's the other thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but any choice, whether that's a relationship or friendship, anything like that, is there's going to be a two-sided, not only story, but everyone has a place involved. The next question I have for you is just, when it comes to the really heavy stuff that I know that you've seen, that I know that you've lived because you have told me a little bit of your story, how do you ensure that even after the divorce, through this whole process, and let's say, let's sprinkle in some kids, that you come out not a bitter human being? You know what I mean? Like, what is some secret sauce to that?
Ultimately, you have a choice to make. That's it. It's ultimately a choice. Make the choice, bitter or better. You get to choose. And if you choose better, which I would think everybody listening to this thinks that that's the choice they'd want to make, then you act in accordance therewith. What would someone do who's getting better from their divorce? What would she do today? How would she act? How would she approach the situation? And you sort of like make this cast out future self version of you and then act like she would act right now. This is just the key to life, right? I'm learning how to do this now. What would someone who is remarried, maybe has another baby, is in the best shape of her life, healthy relationships, having so much fun, has plenty of money, enjoys her life, how would she tell me to respond to this message? Would she tell me to drag up everything he ever did and why he's a piece of shit? Or would she say, focus on the fact, deal with what you must and get out. Don't waste your energy. We don't go throwing good energy after bad, right? How would she act? And so it's the secret sauce. You can make it complicated. You can look at a million different strategies. You can watch all these, Instagram bait stuff online about you're not with the narcissist to make you feel better about yourself. Who cares if they're a narcissist? So what? I mean, okay. So then what? Congratulations. You've called them that. And I think women do that. Sometimes it's true. Often it's not. They are not diagnosable. What you really mean is a self-absorbed dickhead. Okay. There's a lot of them running around. So what? I mean, okay. And so what? So that's the other question, is ask yourself, so what? So what? So what? So what? So what? Throughout divorce, I've made that video before about just, so what? What's the point? What are you trying to do here? So when they're acting like a punk about exchanging some weekend for something, 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 how would that future you act? They're going to do all these things. Look, and it takes an iron nerve in complicated, messy situations to keep the main thing, sort of develop your core principles of behavior. That's advanced, like custody is well beyond divorce. And those of us in those trenches, it's a different whole conversation. But I think the main thing when you're in the middle of it or considering doing it is just making that decision and keep acting like someone who already has what it is that you want. And look at yourself and be honest. How much truth can you accept about yourself without running away? Look at your actions lately. Are they the actions of someone who's going to stay bitter and wind up alone and miserable and be one of those people who's at a dinner party talking about her divorce like it was yesterday when it was 5 years ago? Y'all met that person and you kind of want to get away from them. It's like the bitterness has a stink and
Oh,
you're
yeah.
afraid it might get on you. Um, and instead, how can, and here's the key, and here's the crucial piece of information. It doesn't matter what he does. It does not matter. It does not matter how terrible and all the things. Okay. All right. Okay. All that's true. And there's some things you can figure out of how to deal with it. But it can't touch you if you're okay with you and you keep acting in accordance with your own sort of central tenets. No matter what happens, it ultimately can't shake you when you're good with you, when you know who you are, and you know that in every situation, you're just going to do the next right thing, the next best thing. For me, I always have to ask myself, okay, what's best for the child in question here? What's best? How do I need, and this is like, advanced custody stuff, but like, okay, in this situation, and depending on their age, depends on how you deal with it, but what's best for the child in question here? Ultimately, best for their long term well being. And if you ask those sorts of questions and make that decision, I would recommend if you haven't had that decision point for yourself and you're listening to this, you clear space, literally, energetically, psychologically, even have a little ritual. Ask ChatGPT to create you a Friday night ritual using like Palo Santo incense, burn in some old emails from him, love letter, whatever you got to do, and ask it to create an evening ritual. We're not talking about witch stuff, y'all. I'm just talking about like ceremony. That's what happens at church, right? Ceremony.
Mhm.
Some sort of a ceremony to claim your betterness, not your bitterness,
Mm.
and have that ceremony so that every time you wonder what decision to make, what next action to take, let it be your reminder. I'm going to go a little bit. This is kind of a weird thing that just came up for me. So, when I went to college, I was a Bible major for a while. And so I took a bunch of classes about the Old Testament. There, they talked about this guy named Ebenezer. And then it was like, you would hold up an Ebenezer. We erected our Ebenezer and we learned it was this monument to, I forget, there was some battle or some land or something, this Ebenezer that they would return back to remind them where they'd been. And so I always think of create a ritual as your Ebenezer to return to remind you where you've been and where you're headed. And I think that one act, if I could go back to myself, I would have done that. And it would have been so important and it would have been so solemn and so serious and this like covenant with myself. They say like the ultimate revenge is to live a happy life. And I'm not out for revenge. And yet I wasn't going to be that depressed, broke, fat, lonely, miserable, sad person that at least at the time I thought he wanted me to be. You know, without him, I would be, nuh-uh, that wasn't happening to me. That's why I left, in fact. I left so I wouldn't turn into that person because that's where I was headed. And that's the thing. This is your freedom cry. That's ultimately what you're choosing. You're choosing a life that you think will be better. You're choosing to bet on you when you get divorced. That you don't know what's out there, but whatever it is, you're betting on you that it's going to be better than what's inside that marriage. And you're willing to go. And man, it's a courageous act. It takes a lot of courage. You don't ever have to wonder again. Any person you meet who initiated a divorce, especially if she has kids, she's brave as shit. Period. The end of the story. Because you're trading the devil you know for the devil you don't, right? And that is courageous. And once you do it, and especially if you can find a way to do it well, nothing can touch you. You don't have to be afraid of anything once you make it through that.
The question that a lot of people have is, should I stay in a marriage for the children? But I really think that you've addressed that online, and I think that's to each their own. However, you do have a really good point. If you do choose and you do have kids, how to show up for your child to make the transition, it's probably not gonna be beautiful, okay? You're probably gonna go through a really shitty time at first, okay? Let's be real. But you say to prove this to your children, prove that you are the parent of the year. You could say that you're the parent of the year because you are doing all the things. You are the primary parent, blah, blah, blah. But you do make a point to say, prove this with action. What does that look like though?
It's like being a steady Eddie.
Okay.
It looks like not accepting every invitation you're given. You don't have to accept the invitations to be angry, to the drama, to the fight. You just keep doing the next right thing. Asking that question, what is the best thing for the child or children in front of me? Do that. You sort of almost like when it comes to the parenting, co parenting part, put your own wants, needs, desires, frustrations, angers up on a shelf. You can get them later. But as it concerns these children and this behavior, what you're going to do is focus on them and putting their needs ahead of yours. You're not going to use them as a confidant, a best friend. They're not going to know all the drama. You are not going to try to get them on your side to make you feel better. You're going to not make it cost them to love their dad at your house. You are going to support their relationship with them. You're going to make the kids feel heard. And there's like certain things for me that I would say, I hope it imprinted on their psyche. That's the hope. Like, for instance, if it matters to you, it matters to me. And so when they would have a feeling or something and it's like, oh, well, I'm like, no, no, no. If it matters to you, it matters to me. I want to listen. I just kind of said things I wish people would say to me, to be
Uh,
honest. It's playing the long game, and it's not a game, but that's just the best way I know how to explain it is, you're
Yeah,
not here for this email, this whatever. The first year sucks. The first year is gonna suck. Just know that, and kids are resilient, and they will adjust. And if you it's like Glennon Doyle talks about in the Untamed book, keep serving the peanuts. Like on the airplane's going down and the flight attendant's still gonna serve the GD peanuts.
yeah.
So we're continuing to serve the peanuts. You cry in your room at night. You don't I mean, and it doesn't mean you never show any emotion. Okay. So I don't want to
Right.
say that, but it's sparing and they never need to know until at least they're late teenagers or whatever that you're crying because of something their dad said. Like they just don't. Now, there's this book called Divorce Poison that anyone who's in a highly contentious situation, I recommend that you get and read in short order. It will equip you because it's also not like a take the high road strategy. And
Okay.
that's what some people will tell you, like never address it, take the high road, whatever. But if you do that, then and the other side doesn't, then you leave one side painting facts and pictures for these children. And you have to get sort of like judo level with dealing with that. And really, the Divorce Poison book, reading it is like staring at the sun. It sucks. You will not want to do it. And yet, you better.
Okay. I mean, I get that. I think that everything has to be strategic in some way. I mean, even if like if your kid has a learning difference or if there's something that's going on that, someone's bullying, there there is a strategic way to handle each thing that you have been dealt in life. And so I'm a big believer in like give me the books, give me the resources, give me a group like the one that you have. I feel like this is something that I wish every divorcee, and that's men and women. I'm just speaking from what I've heard, but there's a group of men in this town that have come together and have created that group for them. And I'm like, that's amazing. Good for you
Good.
guys.
I love
But
that. We need
yeah, we
men
need more.
who support other men and step up. What the world needs are some come alive men. I am not anti
Right.
man just because I'm pro women. I just know how to talk to women because I am one. And that's how I learn is from lived experience. But like, I mean, I think that's awesome. We
Yeah.
need men who've come alive. We are desperate for it.
Right. I agree. Well, so as far as trends, do you see something happening in this year, last year that is just different about divorce?
Think, people say normalize XYZ on Instagram and stuff.
Mm.
I think divorce being normalized helps a lot of people get the gumption and the power that they need to do it. Versus before, when it was kind of shameful only and there wasn't messages about people doing it. You were the only one at your church doing it that you knew of. It
Yeah.
wasn't, I mean, even though 50% of people were doing it or so, they weren't talking about it. It was behind closed doors. There were no divorce coaches. There was no one guiding the way and coming back for you. So I think that's the trend the last particularly several years. And I think that knowledge is power and truly getting that information. There's a
Okay.
lot of great stuff online, like from my prep course, but there's other amazing stuff happening. And that knowledge can equip you to make the decision and have a successful outcome so much faster, easier, and cheaper than it did 10 years ago.
Okay. And would you say that there are mistakes that you see that are constantly made? I think you've probably touched on a few, but if you could avoid some things.
Yeah, the number one mistake people make is go into their divorce unprepared. They spend all their energy making the decision and then they
Okay.
don't get any of their shit together. They don't have access to all their bank statements and credit card statements and tax returns. They have no idea how they're going to pay the bills when he stops putting his paycheck in their bank account. They haven't thought through whether a court would think that they're the primary parent or not. They just assume that they are. And they haven't done the audit that we do in the course to say, okay, where am I really and what changes do I need to make? Make the changes, let some time pass so those changes can take root and effect and have the benefit of longevity before they ever file.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'd be surprised as I've learned through just the years and Laura being a lawyer in the sense of documentation, how much is really needed and get really, really in deep with all of that, I think. Like, the more the merrier, as if you were about to sign your life away and they needed all the information about you. I feel like that is where your mind should be. I don't
Yeah.
personally know all of those documents, but that's why someone would have you. But I think that's great advice. I could see where what your idea of it would be and then what it turns out to be could be how much did you prepare? I mean, that could be the main thing that
Yeah,
goes.
you may truly, I'm not overstating this. I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. The circle
Yeah.
is free, the course is free. Okay. So I'm not, but you absolutely cannot have your kids with you primarily if you don't get prepared ahead of your divorce. That's what happened to me. I mean, I never would have been in that position otherwise had I gotten myself more steady, done a few tweaks to my actions and let it play out for 4, 5, 6 months. It would have never happened. I never would have been backed into a corner. And
Yeah.
people just, only fools rush in. That's true about divorce too. It's about getting in and it's about getting out.
Yeah. So I have a few people getting married late in life in my life currently. How important is that prenup?
I mean, it's not the like quote unquote most romantic thing to do, but it is
Yeah.
definitely the correct, logical, legal decision. And some people say prenups are entirely romantic. There's this guy, I think Robert or James Sexton, the New York City NYC divorce lawyer. He is awesome. Y'all should all follow him.
I think maybe you've shared something about him.
He's so
I think
good,
yeah,
but he talks about how the couples who get the prenups, he doesn't see them basically for divorce. Because if you're the sort of couple who can have a mature, detailed conversation about finances and divorce your emotion from the decisions, right? If you can like be reasonable on a tense subject, you're just probably not the sort of people who are going to get divorced, right?
it doesn't sound glorious to anybody, but anyone who's at a certain age knows that I mean, it just makes sense in a lot of ways, and it also clarifies what it is, what the intentions are. It also it forces you to look at your finances as a couple, which is like what top 5 reasons why people get a divorce
Right.
and where you're starting from. It's just it feels like good prep for them.
Yeah, I mean, the contra argument is burn the boats, right? That you get married and you're both all in and you don't have your exit strategy like
Sure.
already laid out. So I understand that too. I get it because I do think in some ways, if you knew how the divorce was going to go, it might make it at least a smidge easier to pull the ripcord, and parachute out of there. I see both sides of it, but I think it is smarter to have a prenup.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're in a happy relationship until you're not. So
Yeah.
maybe just think about it. So as a mother and an attorney, I personally think you're doing such a great job giving us information. Excited for this book that you're going to be putting out because I think the language of how you talk about divorce and how you communicate with us. But then you have this other side of your mother and you're a business owner and all this stuff. And this podcast is about, rising above the burnout. What are you doing personally that you feel like you are so happy you made that leap, or it was a simple thing that you implemented that you
I
maybe
actually
someone
did
should
it
consider?
today.
Okay.
Megan, this is so interesting today. So I have really redoubled my efforts and commitment to taking my own medicine. What does the person who XYZ that I want to become do? And do the act in accordance therewith. So for me, that person who I want to be, what I want to do, what I want to have, she meditates. Like I'm not saying every day, but 6 out of 7 days. And so literally this morning, I was doing a meditation and I was otherwise having a fine day. I felt a little bit heavy of heart, but wasn't, okay. In this meditation, grief showed up and it's for my older son who I haven't seen or spoken directly, been in been with or spoken with in years. It is rough stuff out there and it is a complicated situation. And I love him with all of my heart. And he is not speaking to me. And that is hard. And for me, historically, my personality type, I'm an Enneagram 7, like my upbringing, my mom is this way. Like we don't sit in bad things. I used to brag about, I didn't sit and cry in my bed, not even one day after my divorce. I used to brag like that was a good thing. And you know this, but what we learn and wise people tell me, and I don't know how or why it's so, but just that it is because I trust these people, is that if we don't experience the grief, we don't get the joy.
Mm,
And that joy is the mother of all emotions, and that no one may sit at her table until everyone's included,
true.
including the grief. And
Yeah.
so, my natural way is to lock it up in a corner, deep, deep down, just nope, nope, fine, keep busy, whatever, run, anything else. And today, when that grief showed up, this is the answer to your question. I sat with it. I didn't rush it away. I felt for my son. I felt into the energy of wherever he is. I sent as much love without need as I could. No demand, just warmth. And afterwards, actually, I wrote this poem and I thought I'd share it with y'all. Okay. And it's very short. Emotional double helix, joy, grief, twins, same root, different expressions. Maybe they're fraternal. And for
Wow.
me, it was about this sense that somehow they are linked, but they're not the same. And so for me, where I'm at is I want to continue to grow. And once you get to the outer limit of yourself, you realize that your outer limit, that our growth edge, right, is like at the edge of our capacity to experience all the things. And I know for me, I'm there. I'm at the edge of my experience for great joy, great grief, all of it. And for me, it's sitting with the hard stuff too.
Wow. That look, if I could get a message from you, that's what I would want, obviously. It's that's so beautiful, and I'm so happy that this conversation was more than just the legality of divorce, to be honest, because I think, you do have so many great resources, but you did a beautiful job of touching on the emotional and also just how something that, yes, is traditionally just horrible, but you are not only so brave in how you communicate, but I think you give everyone like so much hope, and now that you have the circle and all these other resources, it's just intertwines with what I personally think we're missing. And thank you so much for sharing this message. You are
And I think it's a
amazing.
way to do it, Megan. The difference for me is, and I didn't used to be this way, but I am now.
Okay.
You can do all of this. You can manage the grief, the loss, the identity rupture of divorce without making the other person wrong as your central thesis. That's the
Ah,
difference. I'm not interested in us versus them. I used to talk about this very differently. I used to make my ex husband very wrong, and it was his fault and all these things. The journey will bring you around to realize that they were a mirror and all those other things. And there's some behaviors I wouldn't choose. And yet I am so grateful for everything that happened and everything that I went through, if nothing else, so I could come back and spread the word because I got a big mouth. So I'm able to carry the torch back, and I think that's the key for anybody else listening. I want you to know that there is hope if you're feeling burnt out, if you're feeling alone, if you're feeling sad, that the best really can be yet to come if that's what you decide. So listen to what I told you. Do your ritual. Make the decision and mean it. Get tattooed in your heart. If you need an actual literal tattoo, do that too. Whatever you do to make the decision to be better. If you do, the road shall rise up to meet you. And every time you need guidance, you need a teacher, you need help, you need support, you need hope, you need encouragement. I swear to you, it will come. There's this old Bible verse, it says, I lift my eyes unto the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. And I don't necessarily align with Bible verse type stuff anymore, but the sentiment is the same. I lift my eyes into the hills. Where does my help come from? I may not be able to tell you from whence it comes, but I can tell you it will come. It will come for you too. I promise.
thank you, Hannah. Where can people find you and use all these resources?
Just at Hannah Hembree, which is Hembree, Hembree Bell, all over all the things. And that's for me personally, seeing podcast stuff and this kind of stuff that I'm doing. Our law firm is at Hembree Bell Law. That's really, divorce specific, Texas specific advice, logistics, legal, stuff like that. If you're really needing the legal support, follow the firm. You can also follow both.
Yeah,
And the
I
book
think
will announce stuff about the book once we have the release date and all that on the personal stuff. So follow there. And if you're interested in the circle, you can go to myconfidentdivorce.com and it will get you there one way or the other. And we can get you all that info for the show notes And Megan, thank you so much for having me. This was special. I didn't, and here's the thing about that whole meditation. I was like, why is this coming up today? Where is this coming from? I was two things. I was experiencing some joy and some happiness and some excitement about actually a new house that we're going to be buying. And I realized, okay, joy showed up. So grief is going to be close at hand. And then I also realized, like, oh, I'm going on Megan's show today. Of course, I brushed up with grief so it would be fresh
Love
on
it.
my mind.
Awesome. I love this. Well, that's how it happens, and you can't deny it, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Megan. This was so great.